So, good morning, everyone. I think we can start. Most people have managed to connect okay. So I'd like to welcome you all to this eSender workshop, the first one of the year, as we come to the end of the first quarter. I would like to convey the apologies of our head of unit, Luca Martinelli. He would have liked to have opened the session today, but he's been detained with some other business with our director. So I will introduce today's session. So just to get started, some basic housekeeping. If you could keep your microphones and camera off. Cameras for the bandwidth, microphones for sound. I think you're locked anyway. If you have any questions, we will take them through Slido. So if you go to slido.com and enter eForms 2025 or follow the link that's just been posted in the chat, you can ask your questions there. If you can also chat in WebEx, but we will deal with those questions at the end, so they will take a lower priority unless you have any connection issues or if there's any technical issues that you can't hear us or you cannot see something, so you can let us know in the chat as well. Today's agenda is for those your regular ones. You cannot hear. Can everyone else hear me? Yeah, Arash cannot. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear. Okay, thank you, Aito. Okay, Arash, it might be on your side. Thank you, everyone. So you can see the Slido QR code on your phone, on your browser, or you could just go to slido.com and type eForms 2025 and you have a Q&A session there. So the agenda, thanks, Yuli. So we are following the normal structure we've had quite some while now. So I will kick off with the business aspects. And then around 11, my colleague Yanis will handle the technical issues, issues like SDK2 and parts like that. So when I talk about SDK2 in the business part, you will get a complementary technical part to follow up. We will see if we have any time this morning, maybe tackle some of the first questions we got in Slido, but normally we will break for lunch at midday in 2 hours time, Central European time, come back at 2, and then have a couple of hours in the afternoon for all the questions. And if we have time, we can even open the microphones and allow a bit more open discussion if we've tackled all the Slido questions. So we know, so thanks to everyone who registered and given us your information about your upgrade. Pretty much we know that a lot of you are upgrading, you're in the thick of it right now, almost everyone. So we want to know how you're doing. So yes, good. I'm glad there's good, but there's also a lot of surprises, overwhelmed, complicated, struggle, costly. Actually, good seems to be in the middle, but it's all the words around it, which is the difficult part. So even depressed and cumbersome and complicated. So eForms complication is still there. We know this for several years now. We hope this update will get you quite far. We'll see later on that if you go into 1.12 or especially 1.13, you should be able to stay on it for a while, but we'll come to that later. Certainly the first upgrade is probably the worst. So those of you for its first time, we hope it's going to be okay in the next few weeks. If not, please get in touch if there's anything that's blocking you. Okay, and we'll see how we can work on some of these issues in the coming months and years. Okay, thanks for that mood, and we'll move on. Okay, now I will share. Okay. So, yes, is the fog clearing? So it's sunny here today in Luxembourg, and hopefully spring is reaching everyone by now. So what I want to discuss today is the results of, of the survey that many of you kindly filled in that we asked a couple of weeks ago. We will talk about the lifespans of the SDK versions. So many of you have been asking about this, and this is a very important issue we will present today. Then looking ahead to the next SDK versions, SDK 1.14 and SDK 2, how they live together. The regulatory aspects, so there's going to be another amendment for eForms. And looking further beyond that, the EU directives have been evaluated as well and will be revised in the following years. And then some more practical issues. So the new version of the TED API, eSender catalog, and we have a question for you about publication time of the official journal on TED. Okay, so we launched a survey. Initially, we were just going to ask how you were doing with the upgrades. And then we ended up asking you lots of questions about how you use the SDK, which aspects you use, what are your difficulties, what you would like in the future, your hopes and dreams. The response was pretty good, but it's, I would say, representative, 22 out of 50 of you, more or less. Probably be a few more eSenders if we count those of you who are indirect. So you provide to a hub and then the hub sends to us. So we don't see you directly, but we know that you are active eForms organizations. So you look at the numbers with the percentages, obviously is out of 22, but we get some tendencies. We identified two main types of eSenders, which you will probably identify yourself as. So we have the public eSenders. In most cases, you have a mandate to be the only eSender for your country. So either you provide the entire platform or you're a hub. So those are the countries which don't have more than one eSender. As a public authorities, often you are also involved, or maybe the ministry next door is involved with EXEP, so the expert group on e-procurement. So you are like the member state representative, both from a policy point of view and also from an eSender implementation point of view. And you tend to be pretty big because you have an entire country. So you could be having hundreds of thousands of buyers and you send lots of notices. So it could be all the notices from your country. The other type of eSender in the countries where there is no national, as it were, monopoly, you're the commercial eSenders. So you are in a more competitive environment. You don't have direct contact with policy. You tend to be smaller. So you are working with a subset from one or several countries. So it's you have quite different experience of complying with eForms. Yeah, there are a couple of exceptions. So we have some big eSenders, maybe in some of the bigger markets. You're actually quite big, so bigger than those numbers we see. Or if you're a regional government, so subset, you're a public authority, but you're not at the, as it were, the national level. So pretty much all of you have gone through the move from the old TED-XML to eForms. We have a few new entrants in the market. And then your involvement with other projects, so PPDS, the Public Procurement Data Space, or the ESBD, so the public eSenders tend to be involved in those initiatives. Some of you are also data reusers. There's one of you in the e-procurement ontology, and no one's involved with the Open Data Service yet, but we hope to encourage you to use it if you're a reuser in particular. Okay, you'll see these slides. The slides are going to be on the website where you registered, so you'll be able to see them in more detail because that's not very easy to read. But here we asked about which SDK components you use. So okay, there's things like the schemas. You pretty much have to comply with the schema, so you tend to look at that. Here I would say I was looking at who of you customize or tailor the SDK, because that's quite a common need. You cannot take the SDK as such, you have to adapt it to your systems. So especially the public eSenders do that. So you customize fields, JSON, notice types, code lists, translations, a bit less for the others. If you're a commercial eSender, you might be a bit smaller, you have less policy needs. So you tend to use the components as they are, or not at all. So use of SDK components also depends how metadata driven your application is, how much you have to adapt to your existing systems. The view templates and the FX grammar are used less. So these are probably more sophisticated needs, but some of you are using them. So, and the upgrade time. So every time there's a new SDK, obviously your use of the components will be impacted. About half of you manage to upgrade in less than 3 months, and most of you manage it in 6 months, but it can go up to 1 year, even more. So we know that it's not trivial exercise, but it's still feasible. We asked you what are the resources that we make available to help you, which ones you use. So the Java toolbox, the eForms core library, the notice viewer, the sample application we have put out. That some of these things we use by ourselves and we share them with you. So the Java-based ones. So it's relatively your users, but about 40% of you use it. The notice editor, sample application, or the XSLT converter from old TED-XML are not used so much. And the Explorer is pretty popular. So that's, we'll see, Yanis, in the next presentation, we'll see how we can collaborate on these resources to make them more valuable to you. We asked about alternative formats. So do you need something else inside of it? So one option was an XSLT that turns the XML into PDF or HTML, the simpler version. That there was some interest. Some of you want some CSV files, some of which are already available in the metadata reference on the developer docs. So they don't have to be part of the SDK, but they could be available anyway. So those of you who wanted other formats tended to be interested in them or not at all. So I think these would be those of you who are more likely to do things as it were manually and you're less SDK driven. So if you're doing things, let's say by hand, the CSV might be easier to work with. And there were some requests to have JSON as well as a format. So there's a lot of diversity, that's for sure. I would say you're all united in diversity. Every eSender is different. So you're all using the submit function of the APIs. That makes sense. Otherwise, you wouldn't be an eSender. So I'm glad to see you all ticked 100%. We see that most of the functions are useful. And you are using them for rendering. Many of you also search on TED, querying the notices from TED. So just the converter is not so popular. So moving from the old SDK, and even the active range, you appreciate being able to query that directly. Usually by hand, maybe your system doesn't have to do it, but you can always check what is the valid SDK right now. And we also looked about the use of EFX, because those using EFX are those of you who are going to be impacted by SDK2, which Yanis will mention a bit later. So quite a few of you using EFX, and you may be using one or more. So the user interface validation, that's what we call live validation. You can adapt your screens to help the users, or having your own validation engine using EFX, so not necessarily using Schematron, or developing your own visualization engine to display using the view templates. So the impact that some of you mentioned are going to that EFX will have on you. So it's when you're translated into some other technologies. So what are you using locally? A couple of comments about validation and visualization in FX. You find that doesn't particularly help you, but they're doing two different things. And you are waiting to see how much effort will need to be put in, even if EFX will bring benefits afterwards. So that's an unknown you need to deal with coming up soon. This is a question about which parts of eForms didn't you need. So eForms brought a lot of granularity and options that didn't exist in the old forms. So we were curious to know, did you actually use them? So group of lots, touch points, ultimate beneficial owner, the unpublished fields. So quite a few skip these things because your buyers don't need them and they're not legally required. There are options you can use, but you might have chosen not to use them. And then the planning forms, there's quite a few different planning forms. Not everyone uses them. You're all using Direct24, the general one. That makes sense. Some of you don't need to use all those forms. That also depends on your buyers. And we also checked, so the new forms that came with SDK 13, all the voluntary forms, and also the review sections that got added in results and contract modification. There's a mixed, some of you are adding one or two forms, some are adding one or two other forms. So it's quite broad. So the forms generally will be popular, especially the voluntary results. So these would be below threshold notices or new types of forms like pre-market consultation or contract completion. So this again depends on your buyers and your policy nationally if you want to publish those on TED as well. But yes, that seems to be broadly popular. And as you know, if you went to 113, you don't have to implement any of this. So maybe some of you managed to get to 1 to 13 now, and then you will add these forms later on. So you can do it progressively. Okay, we had to check which other sources of information you have to partly raise awareness for you. In the survey, you could link to them and check things out. So it here there's no big surprises. If you're a public eSender, you're more likely to be closer to the policy issues. So the information from our colleagues at the European Commission and DigiGrow will be more relevant to you because you contribute them. Maybe even a member of EXEP, so you'll be active in there. If you're a commercial eSender, obviously the policy parts are, as it were, decided for you, and your focus is to get the job done. So we're glad that the developer docs are useful for you. So I counted useful as being 3+. So there's a bit of a variety. So not everything is perfect, we know, but it seems a useful resource. The schema documentation can be improved. The metadata documentation is not so popular. The API docs are quite good, but I'm just going to advertise. We'll see later. We have new version 3 API docs, which you might find better. I'm glad these workshops are useful. It's always nice to meet you. TED Together was a bit less relevant. So it's true the eSender part was more diluted if you were looking for pure eSender parts. But we will do it again at the end of November this year, the TED Together. Those of you who can travel to Luxembourg, it's great to meet you in person, and for everyone else, it'll still be online as well. But we think it is useful to try and mix the community's reusers who are interested in what you provide as an eSender, so the data quality that comes out the other end. You have to reconcile those needs, and then ESBD and e-procurement ontology. These are also building blocks, which are very important, which it's important we bring them all together. And you also find the GitHub discussions about the SDK are also useful. So we'll keep these things active and try to improve them as we go along. This is a very busy slide. Maybe you read it later, but I tried to bring together the different points. What are your challenges for upgrades? What would be needed in the SDK? What would you dream about in the future? And I grouped them into about these 4 main areas. So your probably the most popular one was you want the SDKs to last longer. So stop having new releases, stop making it, stop forcing us into upgrades, have it clearer where we're going to, consult and have a stronger governance for that. So I'll discuss that just after the slide. The SDK in general, you want it to be more stable, not to move too much, be backwards compatible, which means different things to different people. So there's a technical compatibility, like SDK 2 is technically incompatible with SDK 1, but it depends on your environment, what that means. We know we need to keep working on the documentation, improve the quality. So some comments was, we have many SDK versions because we had to fix things. So that's true in some parts. There are also more rules. So it's not fixes, it's just trying to improve the data quality. But that also has a big impact on you. The rule messages, the translations, the XML examples can all be improved. Some of you not working with Java, that adds extra work because you cannot use some of the resources we use. There was a request to improve the test environment, so possibly even be able to have a test TED at the end of it, but we don't have that available. More understanding of where the rules come from, and other ways to do with the viewers. So the difficulties you have with the upgrades is really finding what has really changed. So again, we can see how we can work and how you can help us with the SDK Explorer, for example. You have to work on tailoring. That has impact on you. Probably the most difficult thing is that you also have existing e-procurement systems. Your systems don't do just the notification to TED. You're integrated in a much bigger system. And one rule that we add can have a ramification on other parts of your system. So if you didn't ask for the information somewhere else in the system, then you won't be able to fill it in the notice. So that has side effects, which you will have to update somewhere else. Regression testing, make sure that nothing is broken each time. Many of you, like us, you have external contractors, so you have to plan the effort, saying, do I need these people available at what time, how much effort, what offer am I going to get? The bureaucratic process of ordering those things. We're those of us in the public sector. And if you're a commercial eSender, an upgrade has almost no commercial benefit immediately. You're just keeping up with the regulations. Then on the broader sense, more on the regulatory side. So this is beyond the SDK. How can we simplify the procedures, the XPaths, the rules, the mandatory fields defined by the regulation, have a better classification than CPV. And those of you who are the national eSender, you don't want your users coming to eNotices 2 and publishing without publishing with you. So that's also a concern for some of you who should be a single source of notices for your country. And that's fine with us. We don't want to see them in eNotices 2. So. Okay, so that's the end of the survey. And I don't know if you can see the details, but this is a situation of the current SDKs and what is planned for the future. So we're in March right now. Again, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this on your screens, but the current situation is SDK 1.7, 8, 9, 10, 11 have all been set to end at the end of next month. So we know you're all rushing to upgrade. Most of you have declared that you should be finished in time. We have a couple who have asked for more time separately. So SDK 1.10 and 1.11, we will extend by 3 months till the end of July. If you're stuck, get in touch. So we're not going to switch them off if you tell us that your entire country will be blocked at the end of April, but you need to tell us. And if we do extend it, there are some conditions attached. So please let us know. But from what you've declared, as far as we know, you'd all be on time till the end of April to move off these old SDKs. Legally, we are all late anyway. The Second Amendment had a very optimistic deadline of everyone being off the old ones by the end of February. So we're into extra time. But thanks to your efforts, situation's pretty good. So SDK 1.12, which from a mandatory fields point of view implemented the Second Amendment, as you noticed, was due to end after 1 year. This is way too short, so that will be extended another year. SDK 1.13, which is the full implementation of the Second Amendment, again, will not run out in November. This will be extended 1 to 13 for as long as needed until there is an SDK that allows you to align with the Third Amendment. So for those of you, there's a new eForms governance. Those of you who in the accept will know this. For those of you who are not, you can read it here in the link. The presentation will be online. And this explains how the member states define what changes in eForms, what goes into the next amendment, and how the changes are made. So that's the regulations will be the main reason to change an SDK. There is a concept which is called the intermediate SDK versions, which would be the housekeeping or the technical ones. If I can get my mouse. So for example, 1.14, which we talked about, would be the next SDK. There's no regulation that forces us to have 1.14. We will be improving things, adding things, but there's no regulation change. That would also end at the same time as 1.13. That's a regulatory deadline. And SDK 2, which is basically a technical update. So it brings benefits, but there's no regulation impact, would also end. So if you see 1.13, 14, and SDK 2 would end when there's plenty of time for you to move to the next regulation. We'll talk about the Third Amendment later on, what it involves, but in principle, if the timing is okay, there could be a Third Amendment by the end of this year. It will have a transitional period. So this orangey color is the period where you can start switching to use what has been defined in the Third Amendment. Depending on the scope, the final scope that is decided and the time it takes us at the Publications Office to produce an SDK, SDK 2.1 would be the SDK that implements the Third Amendment. So from a regulatory point of view, if you're on 1.13, your next one would be 2.1. If we make that available in April next year, in a year's time, so from a regulation point of view, there's nothing for you to do for another year. We would then give you 12 months to move on to the new SDK. If this SDK comes later, the existing SDKs would be extended. So that we have at least 12 months between a new SDK being available, a regulatory one, and the old SDKs being available. So a shift in 12-month period at least. And then, okay, SDK 2.2 is a theoretical intermediate one after 6 months or so, where we might have some housekeeping, some incremental improvements. And then SDK 2.1, until there's a new regulation, would be valid into 2028. So you can have some bigger jumps to SDK, fewer SDKs to move to. But with intermediate SDKs that you could move to because they bring benefits or they have technical improvements. So for example, SDK 2 has improvements that will be useful. So that's the overall timeline. So have a look at the slides later, what it means for you. And I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. I can't see them come in, but I think those will be there. So what does it look on the table? So this is the table. So 1.7, 1.8 finish next month. 10 and 11 get an extra 3 months. This would mean that 1.12 would be valid until next June. 1.12 is a little bit of a strange thing. It doesn't really implement all of the Second Amendment, but okay, it'll be there for 2 years, so you have time to move off it. 1.13 would go until March 27, on the assumption that SDK 1.2.1 is made available a year earlier. So these dates are purely indicative. If there's an SDK 2.1 in April, 1.13 will be available till March at least 27. So in 2 years' time. So if you're on 1.13, you're pretty much sure you have 2 years to move. But of course, you can only move when there's a good SDK to move to. So all these dates are purely indicative, the future ones. We will extend 1.12 and 1.13 in the active ranges anyway, so that you're guaranteed it's at least until then. And here our planning is that 1.14 and SDK 2 we had talked about before the summer this year. We've moved them to a more realistic September. So before the summer, we hope to share more information about the more detailed scope, so you know what's coming. But the actual releases wouldn't come till around September. We'll talk about that in a minute. Also, so that we can do it carefully, because there's no regulatory pressure for these SDKs, 1.14 and 2.0. You want to give them a little bit more time to get them right. So 1.14, what is the scope? It's an intermediate SDK, so it has no regulatory change. So it's more of a maintenance release. And it's a chance to tidy up, clarify, and improve a few mainly rules where we think we can improve them or clarify them. So issues like organizations and roles, what is a lead buyer, central purchasing body, joint procurement. Some of it is just clarification of what's already there, but there might be some rule changes to improve it. Controls about when a direct award can be used. At the moment, we assume the buyer knows what they're doing, but we know that it's a bit loose. The rules about multi-stage participant reductions. The rules have to be clear. Tender statistics, so how many tenders did I receive? How many from SMEs? How many from EA? A bit of consistency there. Well, it seems obvious that a monetary amount should be positive, but it's not always the case, so we have to tighten that up. And we're also thinking of limiting the numbers to 2 decimals to make it a bit clearer, the amounts. There are some buyers who put in many decimals in their amounts, which doesn't seem deliberate. We want to control that. There are other things, you can put a nuts code that doesn't belong to the country, so a bit of consistency. The eSender role, we've been talking about that. If you could add the organization that makes it that identifies you an eSender, we will make that mandatory. One benefit is then you can even query that information on TED. So if you're on TED, you can always see the eSender in the organizations. And just to let you know, we will have a patch for 1.13. 1.13.1 is that patch. Unless you're an EU institution, that doesn't concern you, but the EU institutions run with their own financial regulation, so it's a legal basis for us. And there was a new one we need to add. So if you're not an EU institution, you can pretty much ignore 1.13.1. It also comes with some translation corrections in Czech. We have had requests saying, can we see what's coming earlier? So it's true, the first time you see what's really an SDK would be the release candidates. That's relatively late, so we'll see if there's a way we can actually list the changes which are actually going to be in SDK 114, so you see them coming. And if necessary, you can let us know saying, I want to know more details about this, or this seems like a bad idea to me, before we actually go out with something. Okay, where does SDK 2 fit in? So Yanis will cover a bit more details what's going on, but the basic idea is that SDK 2 would have the same business content as SDK 114, so that the schema would be the same. The rules will have the same meaning, just that EFX2 will express some of them differently. We might add a couple of dynamic rules. So these are the rules that compare between notices. Today it's static. We only compare the values in the notice. A dynamic rule means I check what the other notice has. For example, we want to be sure that when you provide a linked notice, so what is my previous planning, that is actually being published. Today, buyers can put rubbish into those fields, and they could be linking to a notice that doesn't exist on TED, which is a disaster for data quality. We want to at least check information like that. EFX2 also brings some improvements for view templates. We'll see those later. So if you're not using EFX, it'll be pretty easy to move to SDK 2, because if you move to SDK 114 and just say this is SDK 2, it should validate in the same way. If you are using EFX, because SDK 114 shouldn't be too heavy in terms of changes, you can move to EFX, you can focus on your move to EFX2. So that's, you have this window of opportunity where the regulatory pressure is low, and we can focus on upgrading EFX2. We want everyone on EFX on SDK2, because next year we will only use SDK 2.1 to move to the third amendment. So this is a year you can move to SDK 2. Well, this year until early next year as well. So the third eForms amendment. So right now we're on the second. This would come sometime next year. This list is not fixed, so it's what is going to be proposed mainly by the European Commission, DG GROW, to the member states using the eForms governance. But this is a lot, there's a lot, well, my feeling is we're in a midlife revision of eForms. What stuff is there in eForms that we would like to improve? The way it's been implemented in the regulation or some other way. So we know a lot of information with eForms that moved down to the lots. So a deadline exists for every lot, but in practice, a place of performance exists for every lot. Should some of that information be moved back up to the procedure so it's not repeated? But we can see already we have 1 million notices in eForms. We can count how often the granularity of eForms was actually used by the buyers, in which cases it was just too much. Group of lots was an innovation of eForms. Did anyone actually use it? Not much is the answer. Touch points, so these are the contact points within an organization. It allows for a lot of granularity. Did people actually use that? Unpublished fields is very granular. You have to unpublish field by field. We're thinking of a proposal where we have groups of fields that could be unpublished, which would all share the same reasons for being unpublished. You don't have to repeat the reason per field. Personally, I think we should also rename this. Natalie, my colleague from the ontology, said, why don't we just call them non-public? Because unpublished means different things. Non-public is nice and clear. There's a lot of too much terminology around that concept. We might revisit the way notices are versioned. So today, the versions are only used before submission. So if something is rejected, you can keep the same ID. One idea is to keep the same ID for every change notice. So the versions are actually the ones also on TED that is published. We have to see how that would work. Framework agreements and dynamic purchasing systems are quite difficult. There are lots of questions how to use them, so that will be clarified. The passenger transport regulation, T1, T2 are not eForms as such, but they share a lot of fields, and they're quite similar. So the idea is to bring them into eForms itself with the colleagues from DG Move at the Commission. So it's not the same Director General in the Commission. How can we improve the registration number for organizations to deduplicate them? So today it's just a free text field. You can put whatever you want. Maybe we can add some information saying this is, a VAT number. So you know that the number you see matches a type of registration, and possibly even have some validation that the registration numbers mean something in particular. And in December, many of you wanted to allow NUTS 2. We do have to touch the regulation to say that NUTS 2 is allowed for place of performance. So for now, I'm afraid your buyers will have to enter multiple provinces or whatever just to define one region. And there might be some other things in there. So this depends. DigiGrow, our colleagues in the Commission, will write guides for each one. So if you go to their GitLab pages, you can see the guides coming through. For example, the one they've written for foreign subsidies or IPI and so on. And the member states in the XApp mainly will be the main source of consultation for anything that changes. So you should be able to see these things come in during this year. If this all goes well, it's reflected in the amendment itself, in the annex, and the target is to have it published by the end of the year. But it will take the time it needs to take, and the SDK will take the time it needs to take. In the meantime, you stay on the SDK you're on. So quite a big menu for this year. In the longer term, also the Commission has been asked, the new European Commission, so they came in last year, and the new Commissioner for the internal market has asked to revise the procurement directives, the 2014 ones, and possibly also the defense one might be involved. That's we talked about. The Commission is doing a big evaluation of how things have been going since 2014. They received 100 replies. There was an open consultation. There was a call for evidence. They're hearing from all sorts of stakeholders, consultations, meetings, studies. So the Commission is very busy bringing together all the various needs of the directives, of which part of it will, of course, be what is published in a notice, what is a notice, but also all the stages, all the types of procedures and all that. The first draft would come from the Commission towards the end of next year. So an implementation would be beyond that. So don't hold your breath, but there's a lot coming. Okay, just to try and speed up the last few slides is practical issues. So as hopefully you all got the email. If you're in the developer portal and your email is associated to your accounts, you should have been informed that on a couple of weeks ago, we finally launched and deployed the third version of the API. So you would have noticed, hopefully, that there's new consolidated documentation. So it's been improved, brought together, all together. We have unified gateway, so everything, all the APIs start with api.tedeuropa.eu. The URLs are more consistent, have been rationalized. There's a single Swagger page with all the possible API functions. So these conversion, validation, publication, visualization, including the search API. So the search API is the one that searches on the TED website. So this is the one where you don't need an API key. This is the data reuser one. And it all goes through the same API gateway. So the current API you're on, which we call version 2, although in the URL, there was a bit of there's a variety of version in the URLs. That's one reason we try to tidy up. Will be supported until the end of September this year. So as of today, you have 6 months to update. There's only 2 things you need to do. Just update your URLs. So the endpoints have changed. And if you're using the submit one, so that's 100% of you, we have changed notice author locale to notice author language, because it's a language, it's not locale. So that is one parameter that has been improved. So those are the 2 things you need to do. So as we get closer to the state, if you're still stuck, let us know. We can keep them open, but we want to encourage you to move in the next 6 months. There is one version number for all the APIs. So if one thing changed in the validation API, we will increase the number, the version number. But we'll always have 2 available and allow generous transition periods. So read also what is a break and change and what is not a break and change in the version page here. Okay, eSender catalog on the TED website. So those of you who have a profile in the TED developer portal, we've had this option to say, do you want to have a public profile? Actually, we need to update this. I've removed it. That is now available. And thank you to the 22 of you who have opted in to share their public profile. So if you go to TED list of TED eSenders, there was a very old list there. We've replaced it. At the moment, it's a bit of an ugly PDF, but your information is public now. And we want to, well, make the list a bit, turn it back into a web page. It's a bit easier to view. And so people can find you. So if you haven't done it yet, please check your profile in TED Developer Portal. Tick the box. And when we update it again, we will do it from time to time to update this list. So the colleagues who look after you as eSenders, Jen and Stefan, they check who has ticked the box, and we do check that you're an active eSender for now. So if you're developing now and you want to be listed, just let us know when you go live, and then we can update the list. So some of you, we said, we're not going to show you yet because you're not actually active yet, but as soon as you come, you're very welcome. And we'll see if there's something else we can do in the developer portal profile so that we have a nice list. So we encourage you to declare yourselves. Even if you have a monopoly in your country, just say so, because that can help when we get questions from buyers saying, oh, how do I get started? And we'll say, okay, if you're in this country, have a look. There'll be a link to all the information you need in your country. There's a single platform, there's no questions. Or I'm in a country where there's a choice of commercial eSenders. These are the ones who are active in your country. You can get in touch with them and do it. So whether you're commercial or public, I think it's still useful that people know who you are. And then finally, a question for you. It's a question that just came up recently, if one of you have asked about it, and we wanted to consult with you. So the official journal on TED is published every working day, with a few gaps during the year, the release calendar. The way we work with actually our contractor who runs the TED website is that your notices are exported every afternoon on working days, and the next working day they are published on TED. So the export goes out at night, and from midnight, TED starts processing it and puts the notices online. Contractually, they will put it, they must have it online by 9 a.m. So we've got all early morning to do it. But in practice, if things are going smoothly, their systems are running, and often the notices are online shortly after midnight. So if you get there at 12:30, there you'll see the official journal. It's already there. The way we've set it up is that we have a sync job that runs at the publications office that checks TED starting at 8:30. calls TED saying, what have you really published? And then it updates our internal TED Monitor one, and it updates eNotices too, which is the one you query. It sets the status to published. eNotices 2 sends emails out. And if you query your notice with if you query your own notices, you will get confirmation that it's been published around 8:30 onwards. One of you asked, can we do that earlier? We see that it's online. Why don't we start earlier? So from 12:30, could we start this sync job? Why not? Well, we hesitate to do it straight away, and we'd like your opinion. We'll ask you a slide of questions after lunch. There's the buyers themselves. Today, they get their emails 8:30, 9 o'clock. Your notice is online. Here's a link. You can go and see it. If we bring it earlier, they'll get the emails during the night. So I don't know, they might start work at 8 in the morning, and great, it's already there. It's already in their mailbox. They don't have to wait till 9 o'clock. But what happens if some mornings they get in at 8 o'clock and it's not there? And they say, oh, what happened? They might be asking why they don't do it. Because we have had some incidents that things got published just at 9. So, something happened overnight, it didn't work as planned. The contractors fixed it. The other thing is for your systems, if you're querying something, if you expect normally to get things around 8:30, 9, will there be a side effect on you if we bring that published sooner? We can't imagine the impact on you, so we want to know if that would work for you. So see you on Slido after lunch if you start thinking about it. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Just a reminder of the sources of how you can get in touch. And just some information about the help desk. I know last year you were complaining the help desk took a while to reply to you. And they were mainly overwhelmed with eNotices 2 users. So now they've split the email so they can handle your ones directly. And right now, they should get back to you on 3 calendar days on average. So that's including weekends. So yes, use the help desk for any business questions. They should be pretty responsive now. And you can also ask technical questions in the eForms GitHub discussions. And that's it from me. I didn't leave much time. Anything else? Okay. So that's it for me. I propose to hand straight over to Yanis, and if there's time before 12 for any questions, we'll try and catch them then. If not, Yanis, I think you can go ahead now. We can see you.
Hello.
Oh, we can hear you.
Yes. Thank you, Carl. Give me a second to get this thing rolling. I need there that screen.
Yep, we can see it.
Good. Hello, everyone. I cannot see myself, so I do not see what from my face. I don't know if that. Where is my face? Can you see my video, Carl?
Yes, we can see you as well.
All right. I need to find the window where I can see myself. Anyway, all right, no problem.
Looking good.
So, thank you. Welcome from me also in this first one for 2025. Okay. So we're going to talk about SDK2 a little bit because we recently restarted working on it and trying to get it out in the next months. We recently studied your questions and suggestions, both from the last event that we had together in December, but also, no, was it in December or November? I don't remember. December. But also from suggestions that some of you sent directly to us. And I would like to touch on some points from there. And then, as we discussed in the last event, there was also some recognition that tailoring is a topic that we should start touching. So I will try to touch on that a little bit. And finally, I will talk about a little bit on how we can work together from now on. So for SDK2, as you know, we only focus on changing EFX in SDK2. So we want to really keep SDK2 fully compatible with SDK1, except, of course, the grammar of EFX, where we need to make some improvements. Therefore, from a business perspective, like Carl said earlier, SDK2 and SDK1 be identical, and from a technical perspective, they also should be identical, apart from the way that the rules are expressed in EFX inside fields.json and inside the view templates. And that, I think Carl already pointed it out, that will allow everybody that does not have dependencies on EFX to move from version 1 to version 2 without any changes. So if version 2 is the same from business perspective S1 14, then instead of moving to SDK 1.14, you could move directly to SDK 2.0. So that's the idea. No, it's not ready, and we're working on it. We recently started creating the new view templates using the new version of EFX. There is still work to be done in EFX. So yeah, we're working on it. Other changes that could investigate, but we're skeptical about it. We will see. We will discuss it with you. Include a full set of business entities. And the field aliases for which I talked to you about, the idea is to, of course, maintain the existing field names, because a lot of people, including us, depend on them, but also adding friendlier names that come from the standardized terminology that we use in the ontology, that will allow us to make EFX expressions more readable, and when expressing or addressing one field, it would make it easier to understand what we're talking about, rather than having to memorize the different BT numbers. Now, all these things do not have to be ready the day that SDK2 is released, but they have to be specified so that SDK2 can support them as we go. The EFX 2 features, of course, the general goal is to make the language more expressive and easier to read and write. We tried to improve the type safety of the language. We tried to fix some issues that we had with the measured data type, and trying to add a combined date type data type. That is not so straightforward as it might seem. but it is used to combine datetime fields in a way that can be used together more easily in the language. We are adding a way of displaying unpublished field information that will reduce the size of the templates and make it easier to work with unpublished fields through eFX. We're trying to simplify the syntax. We added template variables that allow us to maintain and manage and transfer the context, given expressions, especially in templates, of course, execute faster and making them simpler to write, and adding currently template functions that allows us also to reuse part of the template inside in different sections. We're adding an expanded set of functions to make operations easier. That is the preprocessor, currently helping with type checking, but it can also be used to include files later. And in general, the design of the language, the changes, apart from making it more expressive and easier to read and write, it also tries to give us better control of the compiled output in order to have it perform better, to have the compiled output perform better. Of course, the performance of the output depends on what you're generating. So from eFX, typically from templates, we generate XSLT. So that's another big focus in eFX2. And of course, in eFX2, apart from templates, we need it in order to be able to add the so-called dynamic rules, which need access to external APIs in order to function. And this is a part of the work that needs to continue. Currently is on hold, but it needs to continue before we can release eFX2 and SDK2. I've heard a lot about better documentation of eFX, and indeed the current documentation of eFX is very high level. We aim and we promise to provide detailed reference documentation of eFX for those who need it. So it's one of our goals with SDK2 and eFX2. Today, like I said, we're creating the view templates in eFX2 with the goal of being able to review them at the end of the next month and make sure that everything is as it should be, and take the time in April and possibly May, if necessary, to finish the ongoing work in the grammar, so that we are sure that the eFX2 templates are as they should be. Currently, these updates are not in GitHub, but we will publish them in GitHub and we'll let you know. The work on the dynamic rules, like I said, is on hold at the moment, but will resume next month. And in general, based on what I said for eFX2 and SDK2 in our last meeting in December, we're still on the same schedule, but we will know more about the availability of SDK2 in May. So we'll let you know at the next workshop, definitely of a more precise date on which it will be available. Yeah, let's move to the next topic. Now, addressing a bit some of the questions and suggestions that we saw recently. There was a question about the business entity documentation, and indeed I promised to to add it, and I've not followed through. There's a reason for that. The business entities that we have currently in the SDK are the minimum set that we could create in order to deal with the need of identifiers that were there all along since the creation of the schema under UBL. But they're not aligned yet with the e-procurement ontology. And it is very important for us to link the e-procurement ontology with the concepts in the SDK and fully align the business entities. This will allow us to also get the terminology from the ontology, standardize the aliases that we are using for the field names, and hopefully in the future, Carl will be able to work with Grow and use the standardized names from the ontology also in the regulation, in future updates of the regulation. Also, this is going to standardize the search fields that someone was pointing out that they have some discrepancies and suggesting improvements in their design. So all these things are closely related to the business entities in the SDK. And therefore, as they work for the alignment between the SDK, the alignment between eForms in general and the e-procurement ontology is ongoing, we didn't invest time in half-baked documentation. We will finish this. We will have a standardization of the interface and the alignment, and then we will provide more documentation. Currently, the information that is included in the SDK, of course, you can use it, but it's not finished. It's not finalized. So the documentation will come after the alignment exercise is completed. So, sorry about the delay. I hope it does not impact you too much. And if there's something that I should know about this, please let me know and we discuss it in the Q&A afterwards. Another thing that was raised recently was about a migration guide. So people were asking, all right, can we, you're telling us we can jump from one version of the SDK to three versions forward. Because my computer giving me a strange message here about sharing computer audio. No, I don't want to share computer audio. Sorry about that. So there is this idea about migration guides, which the way that you expressed it was that if you're jumping from one version of the SDK, 3-4 versions forward while you're upgrading, you would like to have a way of knowing how to do the migration from one SDK to the next. Now, the idea behind that, of course, was to use the SDK Explorer, and that's why we created it, so that we can compare two different versions of the SDK. In my opinion, the comparison is comprehensive and friendlier than the Git, than comparing two versions of the SDK with Git diffs. If we want to add a migration guide, it will be hard to maintain a migration guide manually from any version to any version of the SDK. This is not practical. So we would need to generate it. Now, if we would need to generate it, we would practically use the same information as the information that we already provide with the SDK Explorer. Maybe, since it will be the same information in a different format, maybe we can get some ideas from you. How would that format be that would help you more when comparing to versions of the SDK? What should we focus on? How can we improve the SDK Explorer so that you can use it better as a migration guide or giving you a change summary better than it already does? But if you have any design ideas or you can contribute in the implementation of this, we will be happy to hear them. And by the way, since we talked about the SDK Explorer, somebody was telling me, I think Carl was telling me recently that he had a discussion about the code list in the SDK Explorer showing always changes. And I wanted just to take the opportunity to clarify that. So every card that you see when you compare code lists is about a code list, obviously, and it has a title for the file, and also it shows some metadata. And indeed, in every code list, you will see that the version number is changing in the metadata. So the metadata of the code list is in the bottom part of the card. Now, these changes in the metadata, of course, are highlighted there. But the content of the code list, whether it changed or not, is indicated by changing the color of the card on the header. So you see that the document used in public procurement code list is this purple color on the header, which means that it has been modified. And then you can use the comparison to see what other modifications are there. Whereas the DPS usage and duration code list does not have this color on the header, and it means that it has not been modified, and the only difference between the two code lists is the version number. So I think, Carl, hopefully this was a misunderstanding in your last discussion with the person that you were discussing this to. Yeah, so that covers this. Then we're talking about another topic that came up recently. It came also up in the TED Together event, but I also saw it in some suggestion from an eSender. What about a reference implementation? Now, of course, that would be great. I know that you're mostly interested about a notice editor, about creating the forms on the screen from notice, the notice type definitions, about generating the XML, about live validation. So we tried at some point to work on a notice editor sample application, but we couldn't keep it up. So the code is there, but the application is unfinished. It has a Java backend and a JavaScript frontend. Currently, for validation, it only uses the CVS. It doesn't have live validation. It generates the XML, and it also displays the form. But it still needs work, and it cannot really be considered a reference implementation. Although it's a basis of one, it is not a reference implementation. Also, for me, I'm unsure about what exactly is expected when somebody talks about a reference implementation, because there is a thin line. We cannot really develop something that you're going to take as is and use in production. This is beyond the scope of what we're doing. Nevertheless, we can have a reference implementation, which is an application that shows you how to do it and can be used as a basis of further work from you. Currently, we are considering the allocation of resources and the possible timing for completing this in Notice Editor. And I already discussed this with our new contractor, and because we want to revamp the existing algorithms that we have in eNotices 2, both for the front end and the back end, it would be an opportunity for us to do something. And although I don't have a timing yet, and it's not decided, I already discussed this with our contractors, and they could provide the resources for this. And it is not unthinkable to be able to do something about this during the summer. So I think that would be good news if we are able to pull it off. The question, of course, would be, can you contribute on this? How can you contribute? We need to look that up, to figure it out. Current main source of information about implementers, or about implementation, is of course the developer guide, which is in the documentation website. The content there is the main source of information for every implementer to address the common problems. For that, we would like to hear your feedback and contribution. I would like to know, for example, whether you used it or not, where it was helpful. If you have any other approach in generating XML or setting up the forms from the notice type definition, what can be improved in the developer guide itself, and in that logic. I will tell you in a while how we can get this feedback. One more question that has been loading, not only from eSenders, but also internally. I had this question asked a few times. Is why do we use EFX, especially for view templates? And I've heard in different occasions we should use, I don't know, standard templating mechanisms, etc. Now, what are the alternatives to EFX for visualization? There's some platform-specific alternatives like FreeMarker and TimeLeaf. We tried both. Actually, both the TED viewer and the notice viewer sample application use FreeMarker in order to generate the XSLT templates. But FreeMarker by itself cannot be used as part of the SDK for visualizations. We also used TimeLeaf in the beginning before we had the SDK and EFX to create the view templates in TED viewer, and we abandoned that effort. We would never have finished the view templates on time if we continued that. And these things are also platform specific. They're just for Java. They cannot be used by everybody. There's other also like handlebars, which are specific to JavaScript and Node. Yeah, handlebars has ports in Python, etc., but still, it lacks the domain-specific semantics that EFX that we can put in EFX because EFX is a custom language. So all these alternatives are general purpose and platform specific. Only thing that is widely available, and you cannot really say that it's platform specific, is XSLT. But XSLT cannot be connected to fields JSON in a reasonable manner. It is crazy to try to create XSLT that uses the eForms metadata through fields JSON in order to generate the visualization. It's terribly complicated. That is why DSLs were invented in the first place. You cannot expect to parse expressions through XSLT it's way more complicated than creating EFX to do this in XSLT. If you don't do it using fields.json, then it's just a manual solution. So you don't need anything. You can just start creating a manual XSLT and maintaining it and updating XPaths manually every time the SDK changes. This is also terribly complicated to maintain without fields.json. So XSLT is not really an option. The option, a real option for a portable solution on which we would have full control that would be independent of the platform and specific to eForms, was to create a language. And what we came up with was EFX. Now, EFX has several downsides. First of all, we need to make our own compiler. All right. And we need to have a compiler that can be targeting different environments. Okay, that is a downside, but that is why we created the EFX toolkit. And it can be used in order to target different output languages. Also, another downside of EFX was, okay, we wouldn't get it right from the first time. You're designing a language, you're going to make some omissions, some mistakes. You will have to take a second or third iteration in order to get it right. Nevertheless, we have full control of the language. We can do whatever we want with it. Therefore, it can only get better, and it can only serve better the purpose of specifying the business rules and the visualization templates in a way that is tightly coupled with the semantics of eForms that are embedded in the SDK. And with one source, with one application, you are able to visualize any notice regardless, or validates for that matter, any notice regardless of which version of the SDK it was generated with. So yeah, I don't see any other alternatives. In fact, recently we did an experiment with a colleague, Paul, to try to create a solution that does not use EFX, and it is XSLT based, and tries to do the same thing with JSON and XSLT. If it ever finishes, but we're doing this on our personal time out of curiosity. This is not a project of the publications office or something that we plan to release or include in the SDK, but it is just an experiment. If it ever finishes and if anybody's interested, we can share it with you. But you will see that it is way more complicated than doing this in EFX, and way more limited. You cannot do the same things in XSLT that you can do with a domain-specific language. So if you're interested, let us know, and we can share it with you. Now, that was about the questions. Let's talk about tailoring. Now, tailoring was something that in the beginning, it was impossible for us to address when we were trying to launch eForms in the past years. But now there's more room, both on our side and on your side, and more experience to try to tackle this. Now, tailoring is a difficult problem, and for better or worse, it depends heavily on the protocol we use to change this data. So the SDK. So what we need to do here, having recognized that tailoring is very important, is to work with you and try to clarify the actual needs, so listening to eSenders and seeing the actual problems that you're facing and listening at the ideas that you're having on how tailoring would work for you. We need to figure out what can be done without introducing new major versions of the SDK. But I'm sure that for a proper and seamless solution, we will have to introduce a new major version of the SDK in order to do this properly. And we should identify these improvements and plan for that major version, which probably will be after SDK 2, SDK 3. Now, the basic issues to address, if I can simplify it as much as I can, is that what you need to do is, in the SDK, we have different types of content, different types of assets, as we call them. So code lists, fields, nodes, business entities, notice type definitions, view templates, etc. And in there are different elements. So different fields, different display groups, in the notice type definitions, different lines of EFX inside the view templates. And you would like to be able to override some of these entities, change in their behavior. So for example, maybe a field is optional for us, but you would like to make it mandatory in fields.json. Or maybe a field that is optional in the notice type definition, you would like to exclude it from your form and not show it. Or insert additional entries like fields that are specific to your location, or suppressing and removing some entries that are unwanted, like fields, etc. So this is the type of issue we need to address, and we need to find how do we change the encoding of the SDK in a way that allows you to do this in a simple manner without having to do it manually. That's the whole point. If we can declaratively create a system that declaratively can override and customize, tailor the SDK. Now, is SDK 2 an opportunity? Yes, I think it is an opportunity, but we don't have much time for this. And as you will see in a while that I will talk about it, it's not a good idea breaking changes other than EFX in SDK 2. So about all this, we need to start a discussion together with anybody that is willing to contribute in this. Recently, the Coalition of the Willing is a topic of the news cycle. So here we need to find the eSenders that are willing to engage with us and try to find solutions on a regular collaboration. The general idea, okay, I almost covered this in the big slide now that I realize, but the general idea is we would define a protocol which the eForms SDK would adhere to, then that the sender would have a filter. It would like a transformer. So the SDK would be an input to a transformer, to a filter that will take it and output a tailored SDK. That would be the ideal situation, so that you minimize or eliminate manual work during the tailoring, apart from possibly customizing the filter in a declarative way. And these are the things that we need to discuss and figure out if we can do them, especially for larger centers and especially for centers that have complicated systems. This will be very interesting, I think. Now, a possible timeline for all this. Of course, in 2025, we want releases and we want to focus on EFX. And the goal would be just touch EFX to allow everybody that is not involved that does not use EFX to move quickly to SDK 2, and everybody that uses EFX to also disengage from the previous version of EFX that has the problems that we're trying to resolve with the new version of the language. Now, if we do this in 2025, we will try, of course, to phase out SDK 1, starting after the availability of SDK 2. And this will probably take the entire 2026, and possibly it will go through 2027. But at some point, when we are able to have phased out SDK 1, then by that time, we should have also done the work for SDK 3 for tailoring, and then we would be able to release an SDK 3 version either in 2027 or later. We will see together what we're going to do about that. That addresses the issues of tailoring. So that's the general idea, and I think we can make it. Now, how we can work together? Of course, anybody wants to test and provide feedback on EFX, we will be able through GitHub and the branches in Git of the EFX toolkit and the EFX2 version of the SDK, the SDK2 anyway. We need to find a way to put together a technical working group to come up with some specification and a planning for solving the tailoring problem. Another thing where we could work together is, okay, if you can help with the SDK Explorer, it will be beneficial for everyone. We're open to work with you on that. I've had some suggestion about improvements in the eForms core library. I hear them, and I would like to find ways to do these improvements together with you, and also possibly porting the EFX toolkits to other platforms. These are the things that I mostly have in mind on working with you, with the most important of these being tailoring. But I'd like to hear from you. What is your availability or your inclination to work with us on this? So I put together very quickly a quick survey on that. So if you would go on Slido and try to answer this question: on which topics would you be interested in collaborating with us on a regular basis? If you don't have the ability or the inclination to collaborate, just don't answer the question. But if you would, then I would hope to see some answers. I limited this to 4 answers so that we can have some, some competition between the topics. So let's see what it says. There are some topics that I cannot see here now. I don't. I will assume that the topics that are not on the screen. I see. So we have 8 answers. All right, tailoring is indeed the most hot topic. I'm happy to see that there's people also interested in working with the Explorer and the libraries. So, Carl, I think that what we're going to do is we're going to contact eSenders together and try to put together a group of people that can find a way to work regularly and address these topics. I don't know if we're going to do it monthly or every 2-3 weeks, or this is something that we're going to decide together. But let's find first, Carl, the people, and then we'll take it from there. So I think that's it from me. I will leave this open for a while so that anyone else that wants to participate in this is able. I don't know if I move to my next slide, if it will close, but I think that we can keep it open even if I move to the next slide. I'm not sure. So thank you. Carl, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Yanis. Look, yeah, for the groups we can get together, perhaps we can see how to get in touch. Perhaps, Yanis, we can post something on GitHub as a discussion saying this is a discussion for tailoring. Let us know, and people show up in GitHub, and then you at least you have a first way to group people together. Okay. Right. So I don't know what happens. We have this active poll. Is this poll linked to your presentation, Yanis? Because we could try and capture some other questions.
Sorry, yes, it is in my presentation.
I think Q&A is a different poll. Different.
Yeah. I'm moving to the next slide and finishing. And I think that you can take it over and move to the next poll. Thank you.
Okay. So we've got about 20 minutes before we break for lunch. I suggest we take some questions that have already come in. Yanis, you haven't had a chance to see them coming in, but oops, hang on, if I can just find them. Okay, so I'll try to tackle the first ones. There will be earlier ones from maybe my presentation, and then you got a chance. Okay, yeah, so this one came in around 10 o'clock, so quite early on Sandeep. So you received the notification, that was the email you got 2 weeks ago, that API version 3 had been released, and that version 2 will be supported until the end of September. So is there a cutoff date for API v2 when it be deprecated, and until when can you continue using v2? So yeah, this is quite simple. Unless we hear otherwise, v2 will stop working on the 1st of October. It just won't be available.
If I may here, I don't know why we decided this. I was not aware. There's no reason to stop technically v2. So if somebody needs it, there is no reason technically to stop it.
Okay.
None that I'm aware of. Certainly not before v4, and our idea of releasing v4 earlier has been cancelled anyway, so we're not going to release v4. So I don't see any problem with keeping v2 there. Of course, yeah, keeping one version of the API running for one eSender is not a good idea. We can optimize on that. But for me, I don't know where this date comes from. Maybe it's from a consideration that I'm not aware of, but technically there's no reason to discontinue the API v2.
Okay, then let us know what you decide, Yanis.
Huh?
Okay, is there a way to withdraw lots before demolition? I don't know exactly what demolition means, but generally you cannot change the number of lots in your procedure. So once a procedure is launched, changing lots is considered a big change, so you can't do that, if that's the question you mean. Okay, then the next question about version 2 and 4. Then, okay, this is what you said, Yanis, so you can change the date. We still encourage people to change, seeing that it's not a big change we're asking for version 3. But yeah, we won't switch it off until you're ready. Okay, if we understand well, SDK 2.0 will be available during August 2025. Can we have the specifications, as it's a major change? I think, Yanis, you covered some of it, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, there's no updated documentation yet. The only thing that changes, like I said, is EFX2, and the updated grammar is in the EFX2 branch of the SDK. We're trying to put comments there. As we move along towards the release, yes, the documentation and the specification will be better documented. But everything that has changed in the grammar, you can already see it, and the updates to the toolkit are also available there. The toolkit that we use in production is also actually the toolkit that processes both the SDK1 and EFX1 and EFX2. So actual documentation when we release. In the meantime, you can look at the grammar updates. It's just 2 files in the SDK, in the FX2 branch, in the SDK repository.
Great, thanks, Yanis. Are the go live dates going to be published along with the schedule for SDK versions? So we had a bit of surprise when we got SDK 113 ready, only to find out it was not available in production. Yes, this was true. We had released SDK 113 at the end of November, and we only made it available in the API in production at the end of February. So that was due to a one-off change we were making on the TED website. So that shouldn't happen again, that big time gap. So in general, from a deployment, from a development point of view, I think you did use it. So the SDK versions are made available in preview shortly after the release. So you can always get started with implementing and testing. And indeed you did. But yeah, we realized that some of you can upgrade pretty fast. So we shouldn't wait so long to activate it in production, but that shouldn't happen again. We would still try to move in production fairly soon after release and always have it available in preview to get you started. So Aito, you were writing a question to Ramon about the lifespans, and indeed, I think the presentation shared the new timeline, so it looks good. Thanks for listening, and yeah, thanks for your feedback. When can we expect the information published in the SDK documentation page? So yeah, maybe next week the active ranges we should change soon, and we could try to put the information on the SDK roadmap page we have on developer docs. We'll see about doing that next week. So a bit of the information we're sharing today, put it in the docs so you don't have to go and find our PowerPoints, and you get the summary in developer docs. So yeah, thanks Aito for that. We should keep to that. We observed the go live date of SDK 113 changed at least twice over a short period of time with no prior notification. It makes it hard for planning, reusing the notices. And currently you watch the version range endpoint regularly to avoid being surprised. Yes, so sorry about that. Like I said before, we had a gap in production, which we will try to be more predictable in future. And indeed, the version range has the ultimate truth, but it'd be better if we can communicate it in a more stable way so you can plan ahead. What is the benefit of moving fields like main location from lots to procedure? I think it would make it harder to be clear about the objective of lots. Yes, no. So some of the fields never change between the lots. So we're looking at the data, and some have a variance of maybe 1%. So we have 1 million notices, and less than 1% actually have different values. So if you move them to the procedure level, this will reduce the amount of repeated data that has to be filled in each time, and it makes it much clearer to see what the procurement is about. You don't have to see it 50 times. Also, if we reduce the number of fields to be filled in, it's less burden on the buyers, and it has little or no impact on the data. So the decisions to move things up to procedures will be done with the member states. So they can also come back saying, okay, in my country, it's always the same. I never use this. So we'll do it basically field or group of fields at a time. And the next question is related. So from Robert Jan. So revisiting the field names and structure and moving them around increases complexity on the technical side because you have to rework the existing code. So simplifying things might actually make things a lot more complicated and expensive to build. Yes, it's true. This will be a one-off exercise. So the effort we put in now would be to save effort down the road for the users and buyers. Technically, yes, it's an overhead.
The field names are not going to be removed. We're just
No, this
going
is
to...
about if we represent like place of performance or location. Today, the information is at lot level, and we might move it up to procedure level. So the
No,
business term is the same.
What I read there, Carl, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
It says revisiting field names, structure, and moving them around
Ah,
increases
sorry, it's your one.
complexity.
Yes. Sorry, yes, it's you.
On the technical side, due to rework of existing code, simplifying things might actually make things a lot more complicated and expensive to build. So, moving things around in the structure of not just expats, etc. Problem. That's why we have fields and field names and nodes, so that we can move things around and still refer them with the same identifier. Revisiting the names of the fields is the thing that I said about aligning with the ontology aliases. That's how I understand this question. And if we're talking about that, then the point I want to make is we're not going to remove the existing field names. The fields will still keep the same names. We're just going to add an alias that is more readable. And then in eFX, we just can switch between the field name and the alias so that the same expression without rewriting it can be more understandable. Eventually, what I hope is that everybody will switch to the alias in years, and the field names is something that we can get rid of. But currently, it's not. It's just a step in the right direction, so that when you read an eFX expression, you stop looking at numbers and having to have a dictionary in order to understand what it says, apart from the things that you already memorized. So that's the revisiting. Yes, it might actually make things more complicated if the way that you're dealing with this is manually, but we'll make sure by working together to make this as simple as possible. There will be enough time between now and the time that, if ever, the field names change, to make this not as complicated as it might sound. Thanks.
But yes, every change is an effort, especially if you have to do things manually. Okay, question from Aito. Any plans to move the API authentication to the contract and authority side? So now there's no mechanism to ensure that an eSender is sending on behalf of the contract authority in the notice. I hate to bring in the comparison, but in the new UK portal, the API authentication is owned by the contract and authority, and it's very neat for eSenders. So we probably have to understand this a bit better, but for now, we have no intention of getting all the buyers to authenticate themselves. So we leave this up to eSenders to manage their clients. We assume you know who your contract authorities are, and we don't want to know. So that's the thing. I don't know how the British do it, but yeah, maybe if in the UK they manage to have a list of all the contract authorities in the country and the portal manages it itself, that kind of makes sense. So then can do that at a national level. At a European level, every country is quite different, so we wouldn't be able to easily keep track of all the contract authority. So that's multiple one. If only did one country at a time, and I think in some countries that's already done in the portals, you know all your contracting authorities in the country, then you could have that, even if you have multiple eSenders, because the single portal in the country keeps track. But maybe after we can see what else could be useful for the API. But we're not going to keep track of 100,000 API authentications. So the next question, can you show us the new complete TED API v3 endpoints for preview and production? So Jenny posted it about an hour ago in the chat, and it's in the documentation. So if you go to the TED API and developer portal and developer docs, you can find that. Basically, everything starts with api.ted.europa.eu. What is the point of requiring NUTS level 3 starting with SDK 1.10 and now SDK 2.1 only requiring NUTS level 2? But NUTS level 3 has always been required. It didn't start with SDK 1.10. It's been there since the eForms regulation in 2019. So it's been there for 6 years. The point of allowing NUTS level 2 is to make it easier to enter the information. So if you have some big interregional project like a highway that's going across your country, you have to put all the little NUTS level 3. Or if you imagine you're, I don't know, if you're in Flanders, it's one region, lots of things happen at regional level. Right now, NUTS level 3, you have to put in 20 NUTS codes, whereas NUTS level 2, you'd only put about 5 provinces. So the granularity of NUTS level 3 is all very nice, but a lot of procurement is happening at a higher level. And the burden of entering lots of level 3 entries is new. So this is a loosening compared to the eForms regulation. That's why we have to change the regulation before we can do it. So unfortunately, we won't. There's no shortcut this year. So yeah, that'll come, but it's in the future. So IPI is an SDK 1.13. Only there are no IPI measures available because there's no implementing act for IPI, indeed. So the IPI code list in 1.13 is just a placeholder. Is it possible to let us know in which SDK version the IPI measures will be available in the SDK? So I have the answer that my colleague Mark Christopher from Commission has told us. So currently there's no IPI measure in place. So there was a report published in January. I'm reading your reply, MC, on medical devices from China.
Yeah,
this would lead to an IPI measure.
Exactly. So currently the IPI measure is not available, so we have to wait, literally. The report was published in January. It's available online, and then it will be, the first one will be very likely on MEA, what Carl just said, medical devices from China.
From China, but, okay. So we'll probably, yeah, we have your link. Thanks, MC. We have a link that we'll publish in the, well, when we finally get the minutes out, the Q&A from this session.
But yeah, we'll backpatch it to 1.13, so everyone who has 1.13 can then update to have this implementing measure.
Yeah, it would be a patch on 1.13. Yeah. Have to check how it worked, but yeah, basically a patch. We would add a code list value. Yeah, IPI was a little bit weird. So it's there, but it's not there. It's there, but the rules don't allow you to use it. So we'd have to loosen the rules saying, oh, now you can use this value. But if you have it in your data structures, then it's ready to go. Which of your sample applications use EFX? I think both of them, Yanis, maybe the notice editor and notice viewer.
Okay, currently only the notice viewer uses EFX.
Okay.
In the notice editor, the lag validation part has not been implemented, so
yes.
it doesn't use the EFX notification yet.
Yep. Yes, it's just a generation of XML.
Yeah, okay. The notice viewer just uses
toolkit. Yeah.
CVS to do validation.
Yeah, the editor. Okay. Okay, so here's a request to get the eNotices 2 as an open source provision, so that you would be able to directly evaluate TFX expressions, visual model, and you need to develop an API intended for the front-end application for creating new forms as part of your project. So, I mean, the question has been, can eNotices 2 be made open source? And the answer is no. There's too much in there. It's too much effort. I think here, Yannis, the way to go would be, like you mentioned earlier, if we can have a sample application for the notice editor.
Yes, the general idea is what we also discussed together, Carl. Before doing the exercise in Notices 2, we could try the same ideas in the implementation for the sample application for a limited amount of time, so that this code is shared with also the eSenders and made available anyway for the benefit of everyone, because open sourcing in Notices 2 itself is not possible.
Yep.
And it wouldn't be helpful either, because Notices 2 has too many other things there and
Yep.
confuse things.
Yeah.
So this is the idea that we're exploring,
Mhm.
and it is possible that the work on this will happen during the summer. Hopefully, something will come out of this. Let's talk about. We will know, Carl. Me
Yep.
and you will know whether we do it or not, and when, and we will be able to talk about it in the next.
Yeah,
seminar.
June. We should.
But,
yeah, we should have
yes.
a bit more.
But also, if we start a regular collaboration with the centers, some centers anyway, we will see together how this can be addressed. But yeah, we understand the need for this, and we will try to. We are trying to find the resources
Yes.
to continue and complete this work.
Yep. Yep. I'll jump to the next question. I think it's a sequence of questions. So the API that Anonymous is asking for, based on Spring, would return a visual model containing the data entered by the user, the results of the assertions, forbidden, mandatory, each field, calculated on the EFX expressions from the SDK. Keep going. The only open source option for evaluating these EFX expressions consists of converting EFX to XPath. It involves converting the visual model to XML, converting the EFX to XPath, evaluating the XPath in the XML. So yes, indeed, although the method is functional, you have limitations, and you suspect there's an internal implementation which is doing that. So I think they're all related. So whoever posted this, please get in touch, because indeed, maybe we can collaborate.
Just give me a
with you
second
to
to read this, the last sentence.
Yes.
In test, we found that it fails when the XML node corresponding to the context of it is absent, making the evaluation of predicates impossible when the XML corresponding to the context of. I'd like more information on this, because
Yes.
this doesn't make sense to me. I've never
So
seen that.
yeah, please get in touch and see how we can do it. But indeed, the internal implementation is something we want to rework for eNotices too. And like Anna said, could we share some of that work? More
Can you please post something about this on the GitHub discussion, so that we can follow up on this?
Yep.
If we have issues with tests and contexts, it sounds a little bit strange. I want to know about this. Thank you.
So, okay, it's 12 o'clock. There are a few more questions we won't manage to finish right now. So I suggest we break for lunch now. We'll keep posting during the lunch. Okay, don't post at 2 o'clock. It'll be difficult to catch, but indeed, there are more questions about open sources and other solutions. So keep posting them, give us a chance to read them. Most of them, I think, will be for you, Yannis, just looking ahead. But we'll have the answers for the afternoon. And if we have time, we can open the microphones if there's something you would like to raise for an open discussion. would have enough time if you don't all come. So then we'll break for a couple of hours. See you back in 2 hours' time, 2 o'clock Central European time. And bon appetit. Enjoy lunch. Hello again, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch, and thanks for coming back. So, so this afternoon is dedicated to questions and answers. We have a few more to answer, but before we tackle them, we'll just ask you a few questions on Slido again. So it's the same Slido session you had this morning, and just to find out what you thought about the presentations. This is just to get some basic feedback, to know if you're getting the information you want. Although I think our most popular presentation of all time was when an actual eSender from Belgium presented their work. That was more relevant to you than what we at the publications office have to say. But if the invitation is always open, if any of you would like to share something for a future workshop, you're very welcome to let us know if you've got something you'd like to present. So it's not just us talking. Okay, so this was my presentation. Hopefully the information was useful to you. I know the extension of the lifespan is definitely welcome news, even though we could have told you earlier. At least now you know what to look forward to. Okay, let's ask about Yanis's question. Yanis's presentation for the next question, please. So this is a presentation about SDK2 and future changes on the technical front. So we hope the more technical ones of you will have appreciated the details and can see what's coming. And for those of us who are a bit less technical, at least we have an idea of what the issues are, what the developers are acting on our behalf. Okay, let's go to the next question. So here we showed you there's a list of eSenders on TED. So would you like to join the list? So we know over 20 of you are already there. Thanks very much. If you're almost there, like you have a profile and you have something to say, but you haven't ticked the box yet, that's also good. So we encourage you to join. Later on means you have to think about it and put something there. And a few of you might want to remain discreet. That's also possible. We know where you are, that's okay. But if you don't want to share that with others, that's also okay. So ideally, we have a full list where everyone can be present. So yeah, we encourage you to do it, and maybe in a couple of months we can update the list again. And we also want to make the list a bit more user-friendly than just an ugly PDF. So that was just to make sure we had something out. Okay, we have another question, which I mentioned earlier, about should we synchronize earlier for the OJS publication? Would mean the notices switch their status to published status earlier. But we don't know if there's side effects for you. So it's looking positive. You don't have a problem. If you really have a problem, let us know, I would say, in the next 2 weeks. If you say it's okay to sync, that's because that's okay for you. But if it's no, it's definitely a problem, then definitely get in touch with us so we know what it is. So your buyers, if you put the notice author email, they will get the emails earlier. If we at TED are a little bit later and we only publish at 9, which is the latest, we might get some questions from buyers, but that's okay. They will be known. So if the buyers ask you what's going on, wait until 9. If we have any problems on our side anyway, if we ever have a problem where we don't publish by 9, we'll also email you to let you know there's an issue. But until 9, it's not a problem. Okay, so that's looking quite positive, but yeah, get in touch. We'll leave it off for another couple of weeks and let us know if you have any objection. So no news, we go ahead. Any objections, we have a check first. So great, thanks for the feedback. And one last question, concerted. Just to, if you could tell us what sort of things you're interested in next time. So we'll have another look at all your survey replies and previous responses to see which issues could be the ones we tackle. So Yanis has proposed some which could be done in subgroups. But if you have any ideas that you'd like us to do, that's also very welcome. Just so you know, at the end of this session, I'll tell you before you leave, stay on Slido, there's the usual post-event questions that ask you that what you thought about the presentation, and then you also have what you thought about the organization. And then you also have a chance to give us in your free text any comments you have, so don't worry. So yeah, business entities were covered last year, but maybe a refresher on how they could be used as well. More practical details. API v2, well, would be presented in v3 if you want in more detail, but I suggest you read the documentation. It has been revamped. More details about EFX, yes, that could be useful, especially for EFX2, maybe in June. We can go into more detail. And then what moves from lots to procedures. So we won't actually discuss it with eSenders. It'll be discussed with the member states, because in eForms governance, that's where it gets discussed. I know not all of you are involved, but if you follow the GitLab issues from DG Grow, you can see what's coming. So those GitLab issues, it's a public forum. So when there are conclusions, you'll see them come in, and you can comment there if needed. So the member states are the deciding organizations, but commercial eSenders can comment there and give some feedback if they see any particular problems. Okay, so SDK2, EFX2, that's going to be that in June. We probably can give you a lot more about that. And yes, how to link together award criteria. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe you mean the award notices, how to link together tenders and tendering parties and contracts. I think that's the most complex connection. There's also, we would like to have some more guidance. Okay, that's good. Give us more information at the end if you want to, so have a think about that. Okay, let's tackle the remaining questions. Oh, sorry, I just let those finish. ESPD and eForms. Okay, that'd be good. If we cut you out, tell us at the end. That's also possible. We'll read them afterwards. So the first one I will leave to Yanis, because that is part of the open source reference implementation. It's a question about that. Yanis, if you want to catch that one. Yanis, are you there?
I am sorry. I thought by lowering my microphone it would unmute, but I was speaking to myself.
Okay. Start again.
Sorry. So converting visual model JSON to physical model XML. So this is what is partly implemented in in the notice editor sample application. So if we finish that, we will have a completed solution. I mean, it already generates the physical model from the visual model. If you look at the notice editor sample application, you will see that happening. So you can create a form, fill it in, and then submit it, and you get the XML. But of course, you know, I understand you will require some documentation, etc. on that. Yeah, thank you. Like I said earlier, it's something that we are looking at in order to find a way to the resources, basically the time to finish that sample application that can serve this purpose.
Yeah, great, Yanis. That links to our discussion before lunch. So, Robert Jan, are the dynamic validations going to be mandatory? So far, I've heard data quality as a primary reason for using them, while there are regulatory requirements. Dynamic validations seem like a risk when migrating to SDK2. What would make it worth it for the users to migrate earlier than required? Yeah, this is a very good question, because we said our aim is to make SDK 2.0 and 1.14 equivalent on rules. But SDK 2 will allow us to finally implement dynamic rules, so comparing between two notices. And indeed, we shouldn't add too many, if any, maybe one or two dynamic rules in SDK 2, because then there would be an additional business validation in SDK 2 that 1.14 would not have. And we don't want to add barriers to the adoption of SDK 2. So yes, I would. There is no regulation that requires us to provide good quality data, so it's a bit of a contradiction. We have no legal basis for having rules that force you to provide better data. At the same time, everyone's crying out for better data. So if we didn't do it at reception, it's never going to happen. So if we have one or two dynamic rules, it would be to reduce the risk of buyers making mistakes like they do today. Sometimes it's deliberate, sometimes it's just a mistake. For me, the most common one is that they link to a wrong or inexistent notice. So you say, my previous planning is here, and they link to notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is very popular to link to, because if the buyer doesn't know what to link to, they just put in rubbish data, a rubbish link. If you can't link notices together, it's pretty bad. Then you cannot see them. We do have a procedure ID that links things together in eForms now. But for example, planning notices don't have a procedure ID. And if you don't link to it, you cannot see if a planning ended up in a competition notice. So this we want to, I would say that's the one I would really want to see in our dynamic rule in SDK 2.0. If it's the only rule I get, that's the one I want. The other rules we could implement could be the ones that compare change notice, to say you cannot change all the fields, but that gets a bit heavier and it puts more requirements on SDK 2. So I'm just talking my own feeling. I wouldn't go that far to implement that one in SDK 2.0 straight away, because then we don't want to trip up too many change notices. But we'll see what options we have. Okay, so we designed and implemented a partial solution to compare two versions of SDK, more precisely two versions of fields.json. I'm testing it, but we plan to share it with the community. Why do we do it? It is to have less false changes showing up, and the result can be exported. So Yanis, for me, this sounds like someone, please get in touch, that maybe we could get that into the SDK Explorer somehow.
Yes, we will be excited to see it.
That's great.
So good job.
This sort of code is exactly the stuff I think, Yanis, we would welcome. So
yeah, I don't know if we can integrate what we have, but
no, not directly.
In any case, it is always welcome to have everybody share anything that can be shared, that's always welcome.
Yeah.
And if we can even integrate it with other stuff that we have and make it play along, even better, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Okay, another question from Robert Jan. So in the release notes, for example, we have a line in the release note that says we updated the existence rules for fields related to procedure type BT105. So indeed, it lets you know it's changed, but not the why and the how. So would it be possible to link to the tickets or the related documentation? Because this would greatly help for not 100% generated systems. So indeed, if you're checking rule by rule and you have to update your system by hand, you don't have the luxury of metadata driven. How can we do that? So my first point is our internal tickets have too much detail and discussion. There's to and fro. It's not always the best way to see what's changing. Personally, I think this is something we can see how the SDK Explorer could show the changes to the rules in differences in EFX, possibly like that JSON fields JSON comparison. Because schematron is not the way to know if a rule has changed. Schematrons are generated. And then somehow have the line-by-line differences at that level. Because a release note is just a high level. It just alerts you to something to look for. But where we look for it, I would try to get that into the SDK Explorer somehow. If you have any ideas about that could be done, Robert Jan, that would be good. And then everyone could benefit from the SDK Explorer. Rules is the most difficult one to compare and the most difficult for one's view to implement. So indeed, it's probably the biggest gain we can make. Okay, are we planning to introduce more warn type error messages in the future? So today the warning error messages, and the next question is related, we only use it for the lawfulness checks. So in the past, in the old eSend tool, you had errors and warnings. The old XSLTs would give you warnings and you could figure out if you wanted to do something with it. We would send you lists of warnings that we saw in your data. But in practice, it made little or no difference to the quality of data. So some of you did improve some rules on your side, which was better. But the buyers themselves didn't do much about it. So in eForms, we don't have any warnings apart from lawfulness. I would say there's two things that we can consider. Well, one thing we would definitely like to do is to extend the lawfulness checks. So instead of using schematrons for lawfulness checks, we would use some algorithms. So comparing the content, having a threshold that helps us identify which notices contain something suspect, and these would identify the notices that we then check manually, so at the publications office. So that's one form of warning type errors in the future. I know the warnings were also used in the past when in one release a new rule would come as a warning, and the following release it would become an error, so you could see what was coming as a rejection. That could be useful, but again, we're not sure if people pay attention to the warnings. It didn't happen before, so it's useful for maybe for eSenders to see them coming, but not for the buyers themselves. Perhaps we can work better on these cases by giving more details about the rules we plan to implement, and to give you a bit more time to consult before we implement them, so that you can help us signal what's coming. So a mixed answer to having more. Okay, the next question. We have this new warning in 1.13. We changed the lawfulness warning in 1.13. And now we check for any organization has the word test in it. The reason we did that is some of you or people who are not here, eSenders or even end users, have sent test notices in production, and they've ended up published in the official journal, which is not great. And almost all the cases we saw, people using the word test in their organization name. So we thought if we put this warning in, we would be able to pick up the bulk of people testing, deliberately or not realizing they're in production and doing stupid stuff. We would be able to catch them. And a human, one of our colleagues, would be able to reject the tests. We know there will be some false positives. So we had a look at the million of eForms out there, and there are some notices that get picked up. So a company called, testing.com, who won a contract, they would be picked up. So there are some false positives, but then so few that, again, our colleagues will be able to accept those. Currently, if we have a lawfulness check, we are currently testing them within 1 working day. So if something comes in the morning, it's checked before we export in the afternoon. So it's very rare that something in lawfulness checks has any delay in publishing, and we don't block the submission. So it's quite a rare case. In the longer term, the best thing would be to have an algorithm that tells us the content doesn't look good. So actually comparing the words that are in a notice, if it's very short, if it has the word test, if it doesn't look like anything else out there, we're hoping to have some basic algorithms that would warn us that the content looks suspicious, and that would be much broader, and we wouldn't have to depend on very basic tests like that. Okay, well, talking about AI, I call them algorithms because AI is a big word, but yes, we could be getting to that. So to our knowledge, has any eSender leveraged a large language model or AI tools to accelerate the SDK upgrade process? We'd love to hear about any use cases where these technologies have been beneficial. I haven't heard of anyone, but if there's anyone out there today, we'd like to hear from you. So maybe later on we can open the microphones, or you could put something in the chat even of any examples you've had. So not for the SDK upgrade, but yeah, maybe there's something could be done there, but not that we know of. Could we confirm that the actual validity end date for 1.10 is now 31st of July, or is it still the end of next month? And can the extension until July only be obtained on demand? So yes, we can confirm it's 1.10 will be extended. We were just updating them earlier today. So yes, so we've updated them since we last spoke before lunch. If you go to the active versions page, the new dates are there for 1.10, 1.11, and 1.12 and 1.13. And the active range, the CVS, will return the values for you. So you're confident that those dates really exist. So the API is a master, and the web page on Docs makes it a bit easier to read. So yes, you do it. So the extension is there. If you are extended 1.10, 1.11, and we haven't heard from you, can you please get in touch anyway, so we know that you're extended for the reasons why, and we'd also ask you for some conditions to move to 1.10. There are some rules we would ask you to implement before you switch, if you could. So please get in touch if you're going to make use of the extra time for 1.10 or 11. Okay, so IPI. So you use the notices to preview to get an idea of the field structure. For IPI, this is prohibited because unless IPI indicator is true, the fields are hidden. So could the API section be made available by allowing API true, even if there's no implemented act, and therefore the section cannot be completed? So indeed, the rules today saying IPI indicator must be false. And because it's false, the fields don't appear on the screen. And the reason we can't open this up is that if we allow IPI to be true, it's almost inevitable that some buyers will start filling in IPI measures by mistake. And that would look very strange. We'd have people reporting IPI that doesn't exist. We have the same SDK in preview and production, so it's only when an IPI measure exists, that Chinese medicines case, when at some point that might come, we would need to patch SDK 1.13 and make that available in preview and then in production, and then you'll see it. And that would also remove the rule that forces the IPI indicator to be false. So I'm afraid we can't really hack it before. So yeah, sorry, maybe locally you can play with your SDK, tailor it, give it a try in your application and see what it looks like. Yeah, it's a weird case, that one. Sorry. Okay, many national stakeholders have reported difficulties in generating and dispatching their eForms on the same day. For organizational reasons, they would welcome a longer validity period for these notices. For example, generating the eForm today and scheduling its dispatched within 3 or 4 days. Just to understand what the case is, it is possible to use a preferred publication date. So that exists today. You can generate today, you can have it ready. You can send it to us and say, please publish this later on. So you actually have dispatched it to us, but you schedule a date later on for its publication. And that's assuming you are ready to send something. If another alternative in your application, at least in the notices too, you're just drafting and completing a notice and you only submit it when it's ready or when it's needed. So I don't know what the difficulty would be in any system just to build up a notice and send it when you want to dispatch it. Just hold on to it. Normally the dispatch date, so BT05, should be the date that the buyers send the notice of application, because that's when they will set their deadlines based on when they send it. They're not responsible for publication, and I would say eSenders shouldn't be sitting on notices before they send them for TED. So I don't know exactly what situation the difficulty happens, at which point the buyer has difficulties, but let us know if there's something specific you're stuck with. How long will the transition period be? Oh, sorry, these are the new ones I haven't seen. How long will the transition period be for implementing the third amendment, beginning from the entry into force? Hopefully long enough to implement 2.1. So yes, when the third amendment is published, it should refer to a transition period. And we have to make sure that transition period is generous enough for you to implement 2.1. And we also have to estimate when SDK 2.1 would be available to you, technically, to be able to satisfy that transition period. So at least at a technical point of view, we would make sure that SDK 2.1 is available 12 months before SDK 1.13 would be deprecated. And there, the end of SDK 1.13. The end of SDK 1.13 should be generous enough and also reflected in the third amendment to have enough time for you to transition. So we should not have the case like we had with the second amendment, where the transition period was way too short. Pretty much unrealistic for almost everyone. So a few of you managed, and that was impressive. But yes, most of you have been rushing anyway, and it wasn't enough. So our plan, at least from an implementation point of view, is SDK 2.1 should come out 1 year before SDK 1.13 or 14 or 2.0 end. And we would work with the Commission to make sure the Third Amendment has that generous transition period. Okay, we would appreciate to have a dedicated SDK version for regulatory amendments, to have a quick implementation for eSenders. All of the stuff like technical improvements, etc., should be put in a separate version. We think this would help eSenders to implement regulatory changes in time. Yes, it depends what you mean by technical improvements. So if we're improving some rules that have can be done outside of the regulation, we do that. 1.13 that many of you came to, I think, had no technical improvements as such. So, for example, business entities came in 1.12, and that was optional anyway. 1.13, I think, was purely metadata. Yeah, so you could focus on the regulatory ones. SDK 2 is a big change we're doing this year, so it should be that SDK 2.1 doesn't have any fundamental technical changes for you. So normally that's the plan. And if you see Yannis's last slide, if we do SDK 3, the idea that would be in the year when you've already done SDK 2.1. So if we do any more significant technical changes, we would aim to not overlap with an SDK, which has regulatory impact. So yes, we would also, that's what we want to do, if we can.
I think, Carl, that in general, this is the case. I mean, the technical improvements in general are in a major version. Practically, we didn't do any technical improvements since 2022. We did some stuff, but whatever we did was not breaking any compatibility. So it would be ignored, basically. So yeah, more or less, that's what we do, I think. But I think the question specifically talks about regulatory amendments. So maybe what the eSender means here is when you're implementing an amendment, just stick to it, leave everything else outside. Possibly that's the meaning of this comment. Because technically we don't change much. We will change some things, yes, in SDK 2 or SDK 3 later, but other than that, I think it is harmless what we did from a technical perspective.
Yeah, SDK 1.12 had business entities, but you're free to ignore them. So indeed, it was an improvement, but not a breaking change. So yeah, we agree with this approach, and we'll see if we can follow it. Well, we intend to follow it, at least on the big scale. Okay, just to be sure, because the previous answer was totally clear about API version 3. This is for you, Yannis. I said something in the slides, but you said we'll keep version 2 indefinitely until we have version 4.
Yeah, well, I was surprised to see it in the slides. I'm sure that somebody had to come up for some reason with this date, but from a technical perspective, there's no reason. I don't see also operationally if there's a reason. If I'm not missing anything that maybe Carmelo knows about the TED website, and I don't know, I don't see that we should discontinue it in September.
Okay.
Technically, I don't have any reason to discontinue the WV2 in September. If there are issues, contractual costs involved, things like that, which I'm not aware about, okay, possibly. But there's no problem from a technical perspective to keep TED API v2 running until version 4.
Okay, then Yannis, we need to update the version and page and the guidance we have put out already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, possibly Carmelo or Stefan have some
we were asked
information.
We were asked for a date, and we set a date.
Yeah.
But I think that's possibly around the time we thought version 4 was coming.
Yes.
So I think there was some confusion in December. We thought we needed a version 4. And we had a transition period where we thought we would need 2 and 3 and 4, which would have been a bit weird. So at the time, we wanted to close version 2 so we could move to the 2 version policy. But if version 4 is not planned right now, then version 2 can stick around for longer. So I think that might have been, yes, indeed, you need something very specific. You're right, Aito, I see. So yes, we will change that. We will extend after. We will change what we've put in the version, and we will change what's in the documentation. Change it anyway. It's an easy change, but we will extend beyond September then. Okay, about IPI, yes, indeed. Does this mean if we were to send a notice with IPI information in it, it would currently be rejected by the API CVS? Today, yes, we're 1.13. If you send a notice that says IPI indicator equals true, it gets rejected. So there is a little rule that just closes the door to IPI equal true. And indeed, then the rest of the IPI fields become redundant because it's false. It must be false. If you fill it at all. I mean, normally you just don't fill IPI at all. So that's the case today. And the day we have a useful entry in the API code list, we will remove the rule that forces it to be false. You will be able to put true. You'll be able to choose one of the code list and you'll be able to complete that little structure. Would we notify the eSenders once API data is accepted? Not explicitly. You should see a patch on 1.13 basically. So could we let you know, maybe by June we can confirm if there's a new entry in the code list, but the way you would know would be through an SDK patch. If you're keeping up with SDK releases and patches, that's how you'll find out. And is there any year between the duration between the IPI implementing act and the release of the SDK version with IPI enabled when the IPI use is considered mandatory? I guess that would be a question of how quickly we could get a patch out. Do I have an idea? I don't have an idea, but I think within a couple of weeks between the API implementing act and making that available to you. So yes, we'll try and keep it short. So yeah, if you have any buyers who are buying something Chinese that ends up in API, then that's going to show up. Okay, so we have a lot of time still. We don't have to stay in this meeting, but what we propose is to open the microphones if you would like to say something. You want to raise something that you'd like to discuss, a point you'd like to speak about. We have the time to discuss. So please just raise your hand if you'd like to speak. We'll make it possible to unmute yourselves. And then we'll go through whoever raises their hand. Feel free to raise any issues. Don't be too shy. Okay, don't worry. We can always get in touch bilaterally if you have any issues directly. Aito, you have a quick question. We gave you more than 12 months of SDK. Yes, it was kind of inevitable we had to give you more, that's for sure. But yes, I think that was, well, we know it's a popular decision because now you've all made the effort to upgrade. You don't want to rush again like you have already. So personally, I think we're beyond, we're finally getting beyond the days where we had lots of SDK versions and it was confusing and upgrades were hard. Upgrades will continue to be a challenge, but not so often. That's the plan. So, and better roadmaps that you can follow. Okay, so keep an eye out on for any communities that might be built up around the issues that Yanis raised. So tailoring contributions to SDK Explorer. I would say keep an eye on GitHub for that one, or just drop us a line and we can get back in touch with you. What's next? So this eSenders workshop, the next workshop will be on the 26th of June. So by then we should be able to give you a good idea about SDK 114 and SDK 2, EFX 2. We should have a pretty good idea by then. And then we'll have another workshop in September. And at the end of November, the workshop will actually be the second edition of TED Together. So eSenders will be part of it. And then you'll be forced to listen to reusers, ESPD, ontology, and the broader issues out there. If any of you are reusers, TED reusers of TED data, I think some of you also do that, there's a workshop on the 14th of May for any updates. If you come to this meeting, some of the information you might know already, so we'll talk about API 3, but there will also be a presentation about the open data service. If you want to query the data in a more powerful way, come along to that one. And there's a, hang on, I'll just post in the chat, there's an event calendar on TED for other communities. So you're very welcome to join the ESPD communities and the e-procurement ontology community to bring your experience and knowledge to those ones. We're always pleased to have input from people implementing things on the ground. So you are the people who get the work done. The Q&A from TED Together last year, we're still working on. But we didn't manage to get it out in time for this, but keep your eyes out for that. There were lots of questions, they're very broad, so it's a bit harder. For this this Q&A, hopefully we can get it out a bit sooner. Luckily, you didn't ask too many questions. We had some answers. The presentations, I think, are already online. If you want to pick them up, yes. So Anis's presentation and my one are already online. Okay, I think that's about it. So stay on Slido to give us your feedback, what you thought of this one. And with that, see you in June. So have a good season. Thank you.